There's a locker at West Haven High that no one remembers being assigned. No combination, no name, no student. Yet every year, someone swears it opens by itself. They say high school leaves a mark on you, but sometimes the building itself remembers more than it should. At West Haven High, the seniors always whispered about Locker 319. Tucked away in a dim corner near the old gym's back stairwell, it looked like any other. Scuffed paint, rusting edges, dented from years of textbooks and teenage frustration. Except it wasn't on the school's current map. And no student, no teacher, not even the janitors had the key. It wasn't listed on any locker assignment sheets since at least 1998. Yet every so often, someone claimed it would be slightly ajar when they passed. Or worse, it would rattle, as if someone or something was trapped inside. It started, as these stories often do, with a dare. Mara, a junior who transferred in mid-semester, wasn't the type to scare easily. Quiet, observant, always sketching things in her notebook that didn't quite make sense, like staircases going nowhere or windows looking into darkness. She heard the locker legend during lunch and laughed it off. "You're all scared of an old metal box?" she asked, her voice a little too steady. That night, she stayed late for art club and decided to find it. The hallway was cold, colder than the rest of the school, she'd later recall. The air felt wrong, like it hadn't been breathed in for years. There it was, Locker 319, and it was open, just a crack. Inside was nothing but black. No books, no dust, just a void. Mara, being curious, reached in with her phone light. The beam didn't reflect back. It didn't touch the back wall, just swallowed whole. Then, a whisper. Not loud, not threatening, just one word. "Stay." She staggered back, but the locker didn't move. No wind, no prank, just her and something watching her from the other side. She slammed it shut and ran. But here's where it gets strange. When she told the others, no one believed her. That was expected. What wasn't expected was what happened to her drawings after. The next morning, her sketchbook was filled with new pages she didn't remember drawing. Pages and pages of that same locker. From angles she didn't see. From inside. The school counselor said it was stress. That's what they always say. But then came the second incident. Jordan, a senior and full-on skeptic, decided to debunk it. He thought Mara just wanted attention. So he made a show of it, filmed a TikTok, flashlight in hand, mocking the haunted locker theory. "It's probably some dumb janitor's stash," he said. He opened it, shined the light in, laughed. "See? Nothing." The door slammed shut. His friends thought it was a prank, until they realized he wasn't answering. They yanked the door open. Nothing. No jordan. No sound. Just empty metal and a faint smell of ozone. Security searched the school. Lockdown. Panic. They assumed he ran away. 2 days later, he was found asleep in the nurse's office. Eyes open, not blinking, whispering something over and over. "Don't open the door if it knocks back." He never said another word. Transferred. Moved. No one saw him again. So what is Locker 319? Some students believe it's a leftover from a fire in 1987, when the old gym wing burned during homecoming week. One student died. His body was never found. Rumor says his locker was right where 319 now stands. The fire didn't touch that corner. And afterward, the records got murky. Others say it's not a locker at all, but something that looks like one. A space folded in on itself. A thin crack in the hallway that's too old to still exist, but too forgotten to disappear. A few believe the locker picks someone every few years. A person no one would miss too much. Someone curious. Someone alone. There's more. Mara moved away mid-year. But before she left, she gave one of her sketchbooks to a friend. Inside were images far darker than her usual art. Drawings of students, not ones anyone recognized. Half-formed faces, hands reaching out of lockers, corridors stretching into voids. On the last page, she'd written, "Locker 319 doesn't keep things in. It keeps things from getting out." Administrators painted over that hallway in 2020 during renovations. Claimed it was being repurposed for storage. But somehow, the stories still surface. A student will mention hearing a knock late at night when they're walking past the new AV lab. or feeling a draft from the wall that was supposed to be sealed shut. A few swear they've seen numbers scratched faintly beneath the new paint. 3, 1, 9. One teacher, anonymously, shared a strange detail. She once gave detention to a student who disappeared for an hour during lunch. When he returned, he was pale, shaking, and unable to explain where he'd been. In his backpack, an old lock, burnt black, still set to 319. She tossed it, but weeks later, she found it again. In her desk. She left West Haven that spring. There are rumors the school tried to remove the locker once, called in contractors, but their equipment failed every time they approached that corner. And each morning, the locker would be there again, unmoved, unchanged, waiting. Maybe it's just an urban legend. Maybe it's the kind of story that high schools create to keep students entertained. But at West Haven High, the students don't joke about it anymore. Not after the last sophomore went missing in 2023. Not after her backpack was found inside a locker that no one could open. And especially not after the janitor found a note taped inside one of the stalls last year. No handwriting, just typed, like from an old typewriter. If you read this, and you've seen it too, don't answer when it whispers. Don't stay too long near the gym. And whatever you do, don't ever try to open it. They always kept the left curtain drawn, not for decoration, not for lighting, but because no one ever volunteered to pull it back. It started with a shadow, not unusual in a high school auditorium with aging stage lights and velvet drapes that smelled faintly of dust and decades. But this shadow didn't behave like the others. It didn't stretch or bend with the lighting rig. It didn't vanish when the lights were off. In fact, it was more visible in the dark. The first person to really notice it was a sophomore named Lila in 2013. She was a stagehand for the school play, just background help, someone who moved props and kept scripts in order. On the third night of rehearsal, she was waiting in the wings while the drama teacher gave direction from the seats. Bored, she glanced toward the back curtain, the one that always hung a little too low. That's when she saw it. It wasn't a figure exactly, more like a ripple in the space behind the curtain, a patch of darkness that moved on its own. She described it later as a place where light refused to exist. At first, she thought it was a trick of her eyes, maybe the haze from the stage fog machine. But then it shifted. It leaned outward, as if something was slowly pressing against the curtain from the other side, like someone testing the fabric for give. She left rehearsal early that night. No one believed her, of course. High school, kids exaggerate. But something had changed in her. She stopped coming to rehearsal. She stopped smiling. 2 weeks later, she transferred schools. Lila wasn't the first to see something behind that curtain. Over the years, scattered stories surfaced, whispers among the AV club, rumors shared during late-night lock-ins. A janitor claimed he heard scratching sound from the stage late at night. A substitute teacher found the curtains slightly open one morning when the school had been locked all weekend. One student swore he heard someone breathing backstage during a solo performance, even though the rest of the cast was seated in the front row. None of it made sense until you look closer at the school's history. The auditorium wasn't part of the original high school. It was added in 1974, built on what used to be the site of the town's old train station, one that had closed decades earlier after a tragic incident involving a derailment that killed several passengers. But here's where it gets strange. That particular train never appeared in public records. No accident, no article, just word-of-mouth stories passed between locals who'd lived long enough to remember a day the sirens wailed without explanation. And then, in the 80s, something stranger happened. A student named Eric Morley went missing after staying behind to help clean up after a school talent show. They found his backpack, his phone, and a half-eaten granola bar backstage, but never him. No sign of forced entry. No security footage. It was as if he'd stepped behind the curtain and vanished. The school replaced the stage lights that year, and they installed a new security system. But none of that changed the uneasy feeling people got when they stood on that stage alone. Some say the auditorium was cursed. Others think it's a doorway, a kind of tear in the fabric of reality stitched shut by the curtain. Not a portal in the fantasy sense, but a bleed-through point where something waits. Not alive in the way we understand it, but aware, observing, mimicking. The most chilling story came from a theater teacher named Mr. Vallon, who taught there for over a decade. He didn't believe in ghost stories. He told his students they were imagining things, that theater was supposed to stir emotions. But one night, he stayed late alone to review scripts. Around 11 p.m., he noticed movement behind the curtain out of the corner of his eye. He ignored it at first. Probably a mouse, maybe a stray draft. But then it whispered his name. He swore he hadn't told anyone what he heard. And yet, the next day, one of his students asked him if the voice had talked to him too. That week, Mr. Vallon left the school. He submitted his resignation with no notice and refused to return, not even to collect his things. In a cryptic letter to the principal, he wrote, "That thing knows when you see it. And once you do, it doesn't forget." So what exactly is behind that curtain? Some theorists online believe it's a form of residual energy, the kind that repeats over time, anchored to places heavy with emotion. But others suggest it's a tulpa, a manifestation born from the collective fear of generations of students. A thought form. The more students talked about it, the more real it became, until it gained just enough awareness to act on its own. There's even a theory that connects it to liminal spaces, areas that exist on the border of reality and perception. School auditoriums are strange that way. Echoing, half-lit, places meant for transformation. People pretend to be someone else there. Voices are amplified. Emotions are high. It's the perfect environment for something otherworldly to slip in unnoticed. And here's the detail most people miss. In every class photo taken on that stage, every group shot, every play cast, every cheer squad portrait, there's always a small smudge on the curtain in the background. Always the same spot. Left side, just above where the shadow was first seen. It doesn't appear in other photos of the stage, only in ones with students. Some have zoomed in. The shape is inconsistent, sometimes round, sometimes elongated. But if you enhance the contrast, the smudge takes on an almost eye-like shape, as if something behind the curtain is watching. Waiting. You may wonder, why didn't the school remove the curtain? They tried. Twice. Each time, something went wrong. The first time, the stagehand in charge of removing it fell and broke his arm after swearing he was pushed, though no one else was on stage. The second time, the replacement curtain arrived with long, deep slashes across it, as if clawed. Eventually, the school just stopped trying. Today, the curtain still hangs, heavy, dark, untouched. They've updated the lights, replaced the floorboards, even modernized the rigging. But the curtain remains. And the left side? It's always drawn just a little farther than the right. Not by much, just enough, as if someone or something is standing behind it, gently holding it in place. Just waiting for someone curious, someone bold enough to pull it back and see what's been staring at them all along. Ghosts don't need paperwork, but one high school received a new transfer student 6 months after her death. It started with a clerical error. That's what the district said, anyway. A routine enrollment form showed up late one summer, just weeks before fall term. Name, Hannah Elise Brandt. Grade 11. Transfer from a charter school 2 towns over. The front office had no reason to question it. The paperwork was clean, transcript, medical history, parent signature. Everything looked authentic. Too authentic, in fact. It wasn't until the guidance counselor, Mrs. Keegan, attempted to call the emergency contact listed, Hannah's mother, that the first red flag appeared. The number didn't exist. Not disconnected. It had never been issued. She tried the secondary number. Same result. That should have been the end of it. But the next morning, a girl showed up. Thin, pale, wearing a uniform style that hadn't been part of the dress code for years. She introduced herself as Hannah Brandt, soft-spoken but polite. She already knew where her classes were. She even knew the names of some of the teachers, one she shouldn't have had any reason to recognize. Her attendance was erratic. Some teachers claimed she never showed up. Others swore she was there, always seated at the back of the class, rarely speaking unless spoken to. Her name never appeared on the official rosters, not even on paper, but they remembered her. The students? Not so much. Ask anyone from that year, and most draw a blank. Hannah? Oh, was she the one who? No, wait. I think you're thinking of someone else. The only clear recollection comes from a student named Becca, who swore that Hannah sat beside her in English Lit. She said Hannah smelled faintly of rainwater, even on dry days. She never had a phone, never opened her locker, never even ate lunch, but she was always just there. Here's where it gets stranger. One afternoon, while updating student records, Mrs. Keegan was sorting transcripts and found mismatch. The hard copy of Hannah's file, the one submitted that summer, was gone. In its place was a death notice. Not just a generic obituary, but a full accident report. Hannah Brandt died in a rollover crash on Route 16 the previous spring. She'd been returning from a statewide academic decathlon event. The school bus overturned. 6 students died. Hannah was among them. The photo attached matched the girl who had been attending class. Keegan showed the principal. He didn't believe it, thought it was some kind of prank. But when they pulled up security footage to confirm if Hannah had actually been on campus, she wasn't there. In every video, hallway, classroom, even group shots in the lunchroom, she was absent. And yet multiple teachers insisted she had been present that week. The only video that showed her was a single frame. The very first day of school. In it, Hannah is visible just outside the main doors, looking in. Not walking, just staring. There was no footage of her ever entering. From there, things got darker. A freshman named Theo claimed he saw Hannah crying in the girls' restroom one evening during rehearsal. When he asked what was wrong, she looked up and said, "I think I'm in the wrong year." Another student found Hannah's name carved into the underside of a desk. The wood was old, heavily worn, with dozens of previous etchings. But hers looked older than all of them, like it had been there for decades. And then came the morning when the entire school heard her voice. Over the intercom, during morning announcements, a brief audio distortion cut in like a static burst. And within it, a single line was heard, "Please don't forget me again." The broadcast room had been locked. The announcement had been pre-recorded. But audio engineers later confirmed that voice did not belong to anyone on staff. By mid-October, Hannah stopped appearing. Teachers who remembered her suddenly couldn't recall when they'd last seen her. Her name disappeared from all unofficial records, notes, emails, even texts between students. It was as though her presence had been gently erased. But then came the yearbook. During final review, the photography team stumbled across a candid shot of the junior class on the quad lawn. Sitting under the oak tree, just barely in frame, was Hannah. Same uniform, same pale face, looking directly at the camera. What made it worse? That oak tree had been cut down in 2009. And here's the part that chills even the skeptics. The same girl, in the same pose, appears in older yearbooks. 1993, 1982, 1974, always in the background, always just out of focus, always near the tree. Some believe Hannah isn't tied to a specific death. Some think she's a memory, a residual echo of every student who slipped through the cracks. Forgotten kids, ones who never graduated, never got their photo taken, never even made it a roll call. Others say she's looking for closure, that her spirit latches onto open administrative files, lost records, forgotten paperwork. Each time she's enrolled, it's because someone made a mistake, or maybe something made sure the mistake happened. The file that arrived that summer, the envelope was never found again. No postmark, no return address. The only reason the school remembers her now is because of that one blurry photo. And even that has started to fade. But if you ever hear footsteps behind you in a hallway long after the bell, or see a pale girl near a tree that isn't there anymore, just nod, acknowledge her, because forgetting her is how she comes back. Time doesn't flow the same inside old buildings. At Westridge High, a phone rang one night in the main office from a line that had been dead for over 3 decades. The principal answered, and after that, he was never quite the same again. Westridge High was the kind of school that looked like it had secrets. The hallways were too quiet after the final bell, the lights flickered in odd patterns, and the basement was sealed off with welded steel. But none of that ever made it into the school brochures. Most people chalked it up to age, The building was constructed in 1964 and had weathered everything from fires to floods. But this story begins in 2019. Principal Matthews had only been working there a few months. He was methodical, respected, and known for staying late, often long past when the custodians locked up. He said the silence helped him think, but he never realized what kind of silence lived inside West Ridge at night. One Wednesday evening, around 8:46 p.m., Matthews sat in his office, finalizing suspension reports. That's when the phone rang. Not his cell, not the main line, the red rotary phone. It was mounted on the far wall, dusty and unused, a leftover from a time before voicemails and digital bells. Everyone knew it didn't work. In fact, the line had been disconnected since the late 80s. It was just an old relic. No dialton, no purpose, but it rang, and kept ringing. 7 shrill chimes, long enough for Matthews to walk across the office, pause, and, against every instinct, lift the receiver. And then silence. Except for one thing. On the other end, someone was breathing. Matthews said later that the breathing was strange, uneven, like the person had been running. Then a voice broke through. Faint. Female. Crackling with static. It said, "It's still here. It never left." And then, the line went dead. Now here's where it gets disturbing. Matthews thought it was a prank, until he checked the call logs. The call came from inside the school, but not from any active line. It was traced to an old switchboard beneath the building, one that had been destroyed in a boiler explosion in 1987. Curious and unnerved, Matthews began digging. He discovered that May 13th, 1987, exactly 32 years before the call, was the date of a tragedy the school had buried. A junior student named Kara Bloom had disappeared during lunch. Security was lax back then, so the assumption was she ran away. But what didn't make the papers was what they found in the communications sub-level days later. Her backpack, a scrawled note that read, "If follow me here, I can hear it in the pipes." The switchboard area was sealed off shortly after. No one wanted to admit a student had gone missing inside the walls of the school. After the call, Matthews began changing. Subtly at first, teachers noticed he started avoiding his office phone, unplugging it during meetings. Students overheard him muttering strange things in the halls about looping timelines and the breath in the wires. He grew paranoid, distracted. Then came the intercom incident. One morning during second period, the PA system suddenly crackled to life. The school had moved to a digital system years ago, so the announcement caught everyone off guard. A soft female voice, barely audible, said, "I never got out," and then it clicked off. No one was in the PA room. The door had been locked since the night before. The district launched an investigation, but there were no answers. The footage from the hallway cameras glitched for 13 full seconds before and after the announcement. Matthews started sleeping in his office after that. Said he needed to listen for it. Here's where things take a darker turn. Not in action, but in meaning. Some think what Matthews tapped into wasn't a ghost, but a temporal imprint, a trauma echo that lingered inside the school's infrastructure. You see, trauma has a way of sticking to places. Some believe certain environments, especially ones with intense emotional energy, like schools, can act like recording tape. They don't just hold memories. They replay them. The phone call wasn't a haunting. It was a loop, a closed-circuit memory stuck on repeat. Matthews, by answering, didn't receive a message. He became part of it. 3 weeks after the call, Matthews left the building for the last time, but not through the front doors. Custodians found his keys and staff badge at the top of the basement stairwell, just past the welded metal door. That door, which hadn't opened in over 30 years, was somehow ajar. The air pouring out was icy. Inside, faint red light pulsed from deep within the concrete corridors. The district immediately resealed the stairwell, claimed there was nothing down there. No signs of forced entry. No sign of Matthews. But late at night, students walking past the front office have reported a phone ringing faintly behind the locked door. Always just once. Always around 8:46 p.m. Some believe Matthews was never physically taken, that his mind fractured after hearing something the human brain isn't wired to comprehend. What if he heard not a voice, but a cross-section of time collapsing in on itself? Think of it like this. When you pick up a disconnected phone and hear breathing, it's not a ghost. It's a memory screaming to stay alive. Cara Bloom's voice, her fear, her warning, all sealed inside a coil of dead wire. Matthews didn't go missing. He synced with the trauma. Last year, a substitute principal temporarily took over. She never believed the stories until one night, while sorting documents in Matthews' old office, the red phone rang again. Only once. She didn't answer. But the next morning, written in chalk across the whiteboard, in handwriting no one recognized, were 6 words. He picked up. So must you. The board was erased. The phone remains. And now every new principal is told just one thing during their first orientation at West Ridge. Never answer the red phone. You ever flip through a yearbook and spot a face you swear was never in your school? That's exactly what happened in 2009 at Westbrook High. When an entire senior class found a girl in their yearbook no one remembered meeting. Not once. Not in class. Not in the hallways. Not anywhere. Her name was Abigail Grace, and no one ever remembered her enrolling. Westbrook High was a small school in Maine, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and senior year was more tradition than milestone. The yearbook was a big deal, edited by students, printed locally, and every face inside it meant something. That's why it shook people when they noticed her. Page 87. Bottom row. Between familiar names, 2 kids who were on the soccer team. But there she was. Dead center. Soft expression. Faded uniform. A faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The name underneath read, Abigail Grace. No last initial. No club. No quote. Just there. Like a glitch in the Matrix. But here's the thing. No one remembered Abigail. Not students. Not teachers. Not the principal. Not even the janitor who'd worked there 20 years. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It was absence. Her name never appeared on the school roster. She wasn't in any class photos. No social media. Not even a locker assigned to her. And yet, there she was. Printed in 400 copies of that year's yearbook. At first, most people wrote it off. A printing error. Maybe. A prank. But then someone checked the original files. That's where things got weird. The digital yearbook files had no photo in that spot. The template showed a blank space, an empty placeholder where no student had been listed. Yet when the hard copies arrived, Abigail's face was perfectly printed. Not low-res. Not faded. Perfectly embedded like it had always been there. Even the company that printed the books denied responsibility. Their logs showed no record of her image being added. No backup file. No editing timestamp. It was as if the image had written itself into the physical pages during printing. A few seniors started digging, curious, nervous, trying to piece it together. And one girl, Rachel Evans, had a theory. She worked in a library, sorting old files and microfiche. She remembered hearing a rumor about a girl named Abby who died on school grounds decades ago. Back when Westbrook was a Catholic girls' school. She started pulling archived yearbooks from the 60s and 70s. And then she found her. 1968, the graduating class. A girl near the back. Same name, Abigail Grace. Same face. Same chilling expression. Rachel showed the photo to others. It wasn't similar. It was identical. Not just a family resemblance. The exact same photo. Same posture. Same shadows. Same strands of hair slightly curling over her collar. Some students claimed it had to be a ghost. Others said it was Photoshop. But the older yearbook had been stored in a locked case since the 80s. It had never been scanned, never been uploaded. And yet somehow this image had resurfaced perfectly over 40 years later. People began to whisper that maybe Abigail Grace hadn't just died at the school. Maybe she'd never left. Rachel kept digging. She found an incident, barely a paragraph, in an old local paper. June 3rd, 1968. A fire in the third-floor science lab. One student dead. Abigail Grace, 17. Cause: unexplained explosion. No other injuries. No full investigation. But the article said something else. Something small, buried in the final line. It is believed Abigail was not enrolled at the time of the incident. School records list her withdrawal 2 months prior. though staff claimed she continued attending classes unofficially. Unofficially, like she was showing up, unaccounted for. Haunting her own graduation, the theory spiraled. What if Abigail had always been trying to graduate? What if she was stuck somewhere between forgotten and remembered? Maybe inserting herself into the 2009 yearbook was her way of being noticed again. Seen. Named. Maybe that was all she ever wanted. But then, something stranger happened. 2 months after the yearbook was released, a student named Liam began acting strange. He was a quiet, well-liked kid, part of the editorial team that helped with the yearbook proofs. Friends said he kept going back to page 87, staring, scribbling her name over and over on his notebooks. He stopped talking in class, barely slept. Eventually, he told one of his friends something terrifying. "She remembers me now. I saw her smile change." That was the last thing he said before he vanished. They found Liam's phone in his locker. One final photo saved to his gallery. It was a picture of his own yearbook, page 87. Except in that version, Abigail's head was turned, her eyes directly staring at the lens. And her faint smile? It was wider. Some people said it was a hoax, that Liam just ran away, that someone photoshopped the picture as a joke. But no one could ever reproduce it. His phone was wiped 2 days later, remotely, according to the data logs. But no one claimed access. The school quietly asked families to return the 2009 yearbooks. Not mandatory, just encouraged. Reprint coming soon, they said. A better edit. Most complied, but a few copies, maybe a dozen, were kept. And in every single one, Abigail Grace remains. Page 87. Faint smile. Eyes like she's waiting. For what? No one knows. But each year around graduation, her name trends again in that town's local search results. Old students report seeing her in crowds. Someone even said she showed up in the background of a prom photo. No face, just the shape of one, slightly blurred, just enough to make you doubt your own eyes. They say memory is fragile, but maybe forgetting someone is exactly what keeps them coming back. Every high school has its haunted room, but at Westdale High, it wasn't a dusty storage closet or an abandoned hallway. It was the chemistry lab. Not because of what happened there, but because of what keeps happening. And every student who's dared to stay late has heard the same thing. Voices whispering chemical formulas in a language no one remembers teaching. Westdale High was like any other mid-sized suburban school. Fluorescent lights, beige lockers, muffled intercoms. Nothing outwardly sinister. But in the northeast wing, just past the biology hallway, stood room 144, the chemistry lab. It wasn't what you'd call old or decaying. In fact, it had been recently renovated. New counters, updated gas valves, even smartboards. But despite the upgrades, there was one thing no contractor could fix. The sound. It always started around 6:47 p.m. That's what Jenna, a junior in AP Chem, told her classmates. She'd stayed late for extra credit, reviewing experiments with Mr. Cross, the science department head. He left for the staff lounge for just a few minutes, leaving her alone in the lab. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the beakers and test tubes. That's when she heard it, soft murmurs from the back of the room. Not loud, not aggressive, just methodical, almost like a chant. Jenna assumed it was a Bluetooth speaker left on. She checked. Nothing. Then she walked past the supply closet, and that's when she froze. Inside, the murmuring grew louder. A voice, or several, repeating what sounded like formulas. Acetone, sulfur, 12 parts carbon, 6 parts hydrogen. But it wasn't just the content. It was the tone, dispassionate, robotic, with a mechanical rhythm, like a broken metronome. She described it later as a machine trying to remember how humans talk. She opened the closet. Silence. No one was there. She left her backpack, ran out, and didn't return after school again. Most people dismissed her story. Stress, sleep deprivation, a prank. But then came Ryan, Jenna's lab partner. He'd laughed about the rumor all week, calling it Chem Lab creepypasta. Until Friday night. He forgot his laptop in room 144 after study hall and went back to get it. The custodians had already begun locking the classrooms, but he managed to slip in. He texted Jenna at 6:52 p.m. "I'm here. Nothing. Just dark." Then, 5 minutes later, "Scratch that. I think someone's in the back." She never heard from him again that night. The next morning, he told her he never made it past the fume hood. He walked in, heard the murmurs almost instantly, but this time they were layered. One voice would speak, and another would echo it milliseconds later, slightly off sync. The phrases weren't scientific. They were fragmented, disconnected. Combustion, oxygen yields ash, invert process, reverse phase. Then something knocked 3 times, loud and hollow, inside one of the locked cabinets. But when he got close, the door popped open by itself. The glassware inside had been rearranged into a perfect triangle. Each item was filled with clear liquid, but none of it was from the original inventory. The administration eventually caught wind of the stories. They didn't officially acknowledge them, of course, but students noticed a subtle shift. First, the chem lab was moved to a temporary portable classroom for ventilation upgrades. Then room 144 was repurposed into storage. No one went in. The lights were always off. And yet, at precisely 6:47 p.m., every night without fail, janitors reported hearing faint muttering coming through the vents. Not everyone believed in ghosts, but everyone believed in that time. 6:47 p.m. Here's where things get strange. When a local historian, Mr. Beecham, heard about the chemistry lab rumors, he did some digging. What he found never made the school newsletter. Back in 1985, Westdale High was part of a state-run gifted program focused on advanced science acceleration. It was hush-hush, no press, no records online. Just a handful of students selected to study under Dr. Lance Garvey, a chemist known for pushing boundaries. Too far, some claimed. Rumors surfaced about late-night experiments, formulas that didn't belong in high school syllabi. Something about preserving resonance through molecular vibration, not just chemistry, frequency. Then one night, the wing caught fire. Official reports say it was an electrical short. But here's the detail that stuck with Mr. Beecham. 3 students were never accounted for, not listed among the deceased, not transferred, just gone. Their names were scrubbed from records, their lockers reassigned, their photos missing from that year's yearbook. Now, think back to the voices. Repeating formulas, always at the same time, always from the same room. What if those voices aren't ghosts in the traditional sense? What if they're echoes? Residual imprints of students trapped in a feedback loop, caught in a moment where science distorted time itself? There's a theory in quantum mechanics called temporal resonance. In simple terms, it suggests that under the right conditions, certain environments can record moments of intense energy, not as video or sound, but as molecular patterns looping endlessly. Most places don't meet the criteria, but a lab full of elements, reactions, and frequencies? That could be the perfect storm. Last year, a senior named Thomas tried to debunk the myth. He snuck into room 144 with a sound recorder and stayed past 7 p.m. He wanted to hear the voices himself. And he did, but not the way he expected. He claimed he didn't just hear the murmurs, he understood them. Like his brain was translating something in real time. The voices began repeating his own thoughts back to him. Paraphrased, twisted, like they were learning his mind. One sentence still chills those who remember his story. "You are formula. You can be unmade." He deleted the audio, refused to talk about it again. But weeks later, he dropped out of college prep and started studying acoustic physics. Said he wanted to learn how spaces remember people. Whether you believe these accounts or not, one thing remains consistent across all of them. The chemistry lab doesn't want to be forgotten. Something about that space is holding onto more than memory. It's mimicking, repeating, learning. Not alive, not dead, just stuck, like a needle skipping the same groove on an old vinyl record. And if that's true, the question isn't what happened in room 144. The question is, what happens when the pattern finally changes? They never told the new students why the far bleachers were off limits. No signs, no chance, just this silent understanding. Don't go under them. But every few years, someone did, and someone always regretted it. In 2013, Fairview High quietly stopped hosting home games. They said it was funding, but asked the seniors who were there that final season, and their expressions always shift. Tight lips, nervous eyes, like they're remembering something they swore they wouldn't talk about. What happened under the bleachers that year was never in any newspaper. But people still whisper about the student who disappeared during halftime and how he wasn't the first. The bleachers in question stood at the edge of the field. Not the ones closest to the gym, but the old wooden kind, massive, sun-faded, and riddled with graffiti from decades of bored teenagers. Beneath them was a crawl space of sorts, a shadowy underbelly filled with discarded water bottles, wrappers, forgotten shoes, and something else, something no one could really explain. Josh was a junior that fall, quiet, didn't play sports, but had a talent for photography. He volunteered to take photos for the school paper, which gave him access to the sidelines during games. That night, during homecoming, he saw something through his camera lens. A figure under the bleachers. Pale, unmoving. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the shadows. Maybe some kid hiding out. But when he zoomed in, the figure didn't flinch. It was staring directly at him. He lowered his camera, looked again with his own eyes. Nothing. Later, he showed the photo to his editor. The image was blurry, but someone was clearly there. He wanted to go back, maybe get a better shot. That was the last time anyone saw Josh. The school never made a statement. No one believed. His parents kept quiet. The next edition of the school paper had a blacked-out square where Josh's photo was supposed to be, just a small caption beneath it. Due to a printing error, this section was removed. Some of Josh's friends, especially Kara and Denny, started digging. They'd both heard the stories over the years, but they always thought it was just urban legend. A girl in the 90s supposedly vanished after a fight with her boyfriend and was last seen storming off beneath the bleachers. Another kid, back in the 70s, dared to spend the night under there as a prank. He came back the next morning, but he wasn't right. He didn't talk for weeks. Transferred schools shortly after and was never heard from again. Kara had a theory. She believed the space beneath the bleachers wasn't just storage, it was something older, something hungry. She pointed out that the school was built on top of old farmland, and before that, native territory. But there were no burial records, no maps, just a curious dip in the field's elevation, right under those bleachers. That week, Kara snuck back after hours. She brought a flashlight, her phone, and Denny waiting at the top of the stands. At first, it was quiet. Dust, the smell of mildew. But then she started seeing carvings. Names. Dozens of them. Not the kind you'd expect from kids tagging their initials. These were scratched in from the inside. Like someone had been down there, trying to mark their name into the wood over and over before giving up. Then she heard it. A slow dragging noise. Not footsteps. Not rats. Something being pulled. She turned off her flashlight and held her breath. It stopped. Then a whisper. Did you find the picture? She ran. Tripped. Crawled until she saw Denny's face leaning over the edge of the bleachers, his hand pulling her up. When she looked back, there was nothing. But that night, Kara started having dreams. Always the same. She's back under the bleachers, but this time, they're endless. The space goes on, the wooden slats above turning into twisted roots, and in the distance, Josh's camera, sitting on the ground, flashing. She never touched a camera again. Now here's where it gets stranger. In the spring of that same year, construction crews arrived without warning. They began disassembling the old bleachers. No notice, no ceremony. Students assumed it was just an upgrade. But Denny, who worked part-time with the janitorial staff, overheard something. One of the workers quit after the first day, refusing to go back under. Said he found a trapdoor beneath the soil, and it wasn't locked from the outside. It was sealed from within. The door was never opened. A week later, the crew packed up, and the school quietly built a new set of aluminum stands in a different part of the field. No one ever talked about it again. But there's one last detail. Every year since, on the anniversary of Josh's disappearance, the school's PA system malfunctions. Just for a moment. During third period, there's a burst of static, followed by a faint voice. No one's ever made out the words completely, but students swear it sounds like a camera shutter. And a whisper, still watching. Whatever was under the bleachers wasn't just some ghost. It was something ancient, something that fed on being seen, captured, remembered. Maybe that's why Josh disappeared. Maybe the camera gave it a new way to reach out. Or maybe it just didn't want to be forgotten. And every time we remember, we feed it again. No school bell has ever rung after midnight, unless something else is trying to call you back. At Weston High, the bell tower had been silent for 17 years, until one night it rang 3 times and a senior went missing before the morning roll call. There's a strange kind of silence that exists in schools at night. The kind that doesn't just feel empty, it feels watched. Most students never experience it, but those who stay too long, whether by detention or mistake, always report the same thing. The ticking of clocks becomes louder. The lights hum like they're whispering, and the bell tower starts to feel alive. Weston High School was built in 1928, and for nearly a century, it kept time with a massive brass bell housed in a spire above the old administration wing. The bell was manually operated up until 2007, when the tower was decommissioned after a fire damaged its upper floors. Since then, the stairwell to the bell had been sealed, padlocked, and chained. At least, that's what the students were told. In 2023, the graduating class included a student named Brent Calloway. He wasn't popular, but he was known, quiet, curious, and a little too interested in the school's history. His friends often joked that he lived in the archives. Brent had found school blueprint from 1929, read old detention logs, and even scanned staff directories from the 40s. But in his final year, Brent became obsessed with one particular event, the Midnight Bell incident of 1986. According to a barely legible clipping in an old student paper, a janitor named Arthur Graves had been found unconscious at the base of the bell tower stairwell. He claimed the bell had rung on its own at exactly 12:03 a.m. and that he had climbed the stairs thinking someone had broken in. But halfway up, he said he heard someone walking above him, dragging something metallic. The story never made the local paper. The school claimed it was dehydration and overwork. Graves retired weeks later. Brent didn't buy it. What haunted him most was that the 1986 incident coincided with a student disappearance. Mia Larkin, a junior who vanished walking home from a late theater rehearsal. She was last seen near the administration wing, and her backpack was found by the locked bell tower door. Brent began connecting dots that no one wanted connected. He wrote notes, sketched maps, even claimed that the original blueprints showed an extra floor that didn't appear in any modern layout. His friends started to distance themselves when he began recording himself at school late into the evenings, whispering about repeating timelines and how the bell doesn't ring for time, it rings through it. On June 4th, 2 weeks before graduation, Brent stayed behind after a senior awards night. The janitor, Mr. Holloway, said he saw Brent walking toward the east hallway near the bell tower, alone, around 11:50 p.m. The hallway lights flickered and then went out. By morning, Brent was gone. His car was still in the lot. His backpack was found outside the bell tower stairwell. And several teachers reported hearing something strange that night. A bell ringing. Once. Twice. Then a long third chime that echoed unnaturally through the corridors. But the school's PA system was offline. The old bell hadn't been touched in years. Security footage showed nothing after 11:57 p.m., just static. An internal investigation claimed Brent had likely run away. But the seniors started whispering. 3 students claimed to have received voicemails with no caller ID, each just a low-pitched bell tone and static. One said they could hear faint breathing behind it. 2 weeks passed. Graduation came and went. The chair reserved for Brent stayed empty. But something even stranger happened during the summer. A maintenance crew hired to restore the east hallway reported finding a door behind a collapsed section of drywall. A narrow metal hatch, sealed shut, that wasn't on any blueprint. It led into a hollow space behind the bell tower's main support beams. Inside was a short staircase that ascended into darkness and ended at a heavy steel trapdoor. Above it, the old bell, still intact, still mounted, still connected to a mechanical winding system. And sitting at the top step, half covered in dust, was a cassette tape with a label written in pen. "Play Me at Midnight." No one has admitted to playing it. No report says what's on the tape. But the room was sealed again. No announcement was made. School resumed that fall. The students returned. And then, on October 13th, a sophomore taking night classes in remedial English reported hearing the bell 3 times. At 12:03 a.m., the student said he followed the sound to the east wing and saw a shadow at the top of the stairwell. A figure standing perfectly still, backlit by a faint red glow. When he blinked, it was gone. Since then, Weston High has seen 3 more disappearances, 1 in 2024 and 2 this year. Each one happened within a week of the bell ringing at midnight. No one talks about it publicly, but students have started a new tradition. Every graduating class now paints their names on the wall across from the bell tower door, as if trying to anchor themselves in the present, as if afraid they'll be forgotten, as if the final bell might ring for them next. Because here's the thing that doesn't add up. The old bell tower clock was damaged in 2007. It hasn't worked in over a decade. The bell should be permanently silenced. But the sound of the bell that night in June, it was recorded on a teacher's cell phone, left charging overnight in the classroom across the hall. The audio file was passed around by students, mostly as a creepy curiosity. The chimes are clear, 3 distinct rings. But what disturbed the teacher most wasn't the sound. It was the timestamp on the recording. 12:03 a.m., June 4th, 1986. The exact time and date that Arthur Graves claimed to hear footsteps above him. The exact moment Mia Larkin vanished. And now, the moment Brent Calloway was last seen. Room 206 doesn't exist anymore, but some students still remember being inside it. One swears they fell asleep in there during detention. Another claims they saw it while cutting through the second-floor hallway. And one janitor, just weeks before quitting, left behind a scrawled note on the wall near the supply closet. It read, "There were never supposed to be that many desks." In 2009, Ravenhill High, a quiet suburban school in Pennsylvania, underwent renovations to modernize its east wing. Everything was going according to plan until the architects noticed something strange. Room numbers on the second floor jumped from 205 to 207. Initially, it was brushed off as a simple renumbering mistake. That is, until the contractors tried to locate room 206 on the school's original blueprints and found that the room had been erased. Not left blank, erased, as though someone had deliberately removed all trace of it. Even the oldest plans, archived in the county records office, skipped directly from 205 to 207. What's more disturbing, teachers who had worked at Ravenhill for decades had no memory of room 206 ever existing. Except one, Mrs. Fay, a retired English teacher who taught there from 1978 to 1999, recalled something chilling. She said room 206 was once the overflow room for students who had nowhere else to go. Kids who got lost in the system, transferred mid-semester with no files, assigned temporary IDs, sat in that room, and disappeared from memory after they left. Her words, "We used to joke that room 206 was where the forgotten kids went. But at some point, it wasn't a joke anymore." There's a story from 1985 about a student named Calvin Maris. According to sparse records, Calvin was only at Ravenhill for 3 weeks. He didn't speak much, always wore the same jacket, never answered roll call. He was last seen walking in a room 206 after school. His parents showed up that evening when he didn't come home. The school insisted he'd never enrolled. No paperwork, no locker, no record of classes. The classroom door, room 206, was locked. The next morning, it was gone. In its place, a blank stretch of wall, freshly painted, as if it had never been a door at all. What makes this story especially eerie isn't just the vanishing room, but how the school reacted. Ravenhill administration allegedly began sealing off parts of the second floor with no explanation, locking utility closets, closing hallway access due to maintenance. A student-run school paper from 2011 wrote an exposé titled "The Door That Shouldn't Be There." In it, they published grainy photos of a door with no number wedge between 205 and 207. The article claimed that when they tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. but they could hear chairs scraping inside and whispering. One line from the article has circulated online forums for years. We knocked. Something knocked back. Years later, a substitute teacher named Mr. Barrett, new to the district, was filling in for a math class. According to his testimony online, he took the wrong staircase and ended up in a hallway he didn't recognize. I swear it was normal at first, he wrote. Fluorescent lights, tiled floor, faded bulletin boards. But then I passed room 206. Door was ajar. No light inside. I thought it was just unused. Curious, he stepped in. Desks. Chalkboard. Open windows. Everything seemed normal until he noticed the posters on the wall were decades out of date. Presidential campaign flyers from the 80s. A missing child poster that looked hand-drawn. A clock that was ticking, but the hand weren't moving. He backed out. When he returned later with a security guard, the hallway was gone. Just solid wall where the corridor had been. The deeper you go, the more unsettling the coincidences. Multiple students have reported dreams about being trapped in a classroom where time doesn't pass, where they sit at a desk and can't stand up, where the intercom crackles but never says anything, just static and a faint voice repeating, "Attendance is mandatory." Some of them described the exact layout of room 206, despite never having been inside. One student even drew a floor plan that matched the 1982 blueprint, the one that supposedly never existed. There's also the security footage. In 2017, a student named Lila was caught on camera walking toward the East Wing during lunch period. She turns a corner and then vanishes from view. 2 minutes later, the same camera catches her running back, pale and trembling. Her story? She was dared to try the Room 206 challenge, a local rumor where students knock on the blank wall between rooms and say, "I'm here for class." She did it as a joke. Only this time, the wall opened. She stepped in. The classroom was dimly lit, with students sitting silently at desks, staring straight ahead. Their faces were wrong, blurry, unfocused like bad photographs. One turned toward her. She says its eyes were entirely black, not in a grotesque or gory way, just impossibly empty. When she turned to run, the door was gone. She started banging on the wall, and eventually she was out. 2 minutes passed on camera, but she claimed she was inside for over an hour. So what is room 206? Some speculate it's a psychic echo, a residual space created by the forgotten. Others say it's a thin spot in reality, where students who fall between the cracks, socially, mentally, or emotionally, go when no one notices them disappearing. There's a theory that room 206 exists only when someone is meant to see it, that it feeds off neglect, that it's not haunted in the traditional sense but alive, an intelligent presence that masquerades as a classroom, inviting people in under the guise of normalcy. And when they walk in, it studies them, learns their fears, and then decides whether to let them out. Perhaps the most disturbing theory is one hidden in an old faculty handbook found in the school's archive room. A handwritten note in the margin near the emergency evacuation map reads, "If you find yourself in room 206, do not answer roll call. Do not look at the others. And whatever you do, don't take the test." He never clocked out. For almost 30 years, the night custodian at North Pine High roamed the halls long after everyone else had gone home. Staff assumed he was just dedicated, quiet, harmless. But when the school district finally investigated a closed-off wing for renovations, they found a broom propped neatly against the door. The rooms inside were spotless. The wing had been sealed since 1994. His name was Walter Griggs. No one really remembered hiring him, but his name was on the payroll, buried in old personnel files no one had checked in decades. He wore the same thing every day, dark blue coveralls with a name patch stitched across the chest in faded thread. Most students didn't notice him, and if they did, it was just a passing glimpse. But the few who did pay attention, they noticed something strange. He never aged. Photos from yearbooks in the early 2000s showed him in the background of group shots, identical to how he looked now. Same build, same posture, same patch. There was no graying of hair, no deepening of wrinkles. Just that blank, patient stare. It was a senior named Callie who first started digging. She worked with the yearbook club and was organizing old photos from the storage room, a cluttered space near the faculty lounge where old boxes of memorabilia gathered dust. That's where she found a reel of old security footage from 1997, labeled West Wing, last semester. She'd only found it because the box had cracked open and spilled into a bin of lost and found jackets. She brought the tape to Mr. Eldridge, the media teacher, and he managed to play it on a machine older than some of the classrooms. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped 2:43 a.m. It showed the west hallway, an area that, according to her map, hadn't been used in over 25 years. But in the footage, it wasn't abandoned. It was spotless. The lights were on, and Walter was there, pushing a mop bucket slowly across the floor. Every few minutes, he'd stop and stare at a specific locker. Locker 313. Then he'd keep moving like clockwork. Callie brought it up at a staff meeting, mostly as a joke. But she noticed something she wasn't supposed to see. Mr. Whitmore, the vice principal, flinched. Not a full-body jolt, just a flicker in his eyes, like someone had said a name he hadn't heard in years. That's when things began to unravel. The West Wing had been closed after an electrical fire in 1994. No one was hurt. At least, that's what the official record said. But one student never came back after the incident. A junior named Evan McCrae. His disappearance was chalked up to a transfer, but Callie couldn't find any records of him enrolling anywhere else. It was like he vanished. Not withdrawn, not expelled, just deleted. She went to the West Wing one afternoon. The janitor's closet near room 301 was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like lemon cleaner and dust. There were no footprints, no trash, no cobwebs. Everything was pristine, like it had just been cleaned. But no one had the key to that wing, not even a maintenance supervisor. The next day, Walter wasn't at school. His name vanished from a schedule. His locker in the custodial break room was empty, except for a folded piece of paper on the shelf. No note, just a list of room numbers. 6 of them. Callie recognized one, room 313, but she couldn't place the others. That night, she returned, bringing a flashlight and her phone. The West Wing was cold. Too cold. The kind of cold that doesn't come from broken heaters, but from somewhere deeper. Like the air itself was stale, ancient, undisturbed. Room 313 was locked, but the lock gave easily. Inside, the desks were arranged in perfect rows. A single light buzzed above, flickering rhythmically. There was a name carved into the teacher's desk. Evan McCrae. On the chalkboard, smeared faintly under layers of time, was a sentence written over and over, "I will not leave." Callie ran. She didn't tell anyone for days. But she couldn't forget what she saw. And then the dream started. She saw Walter standing at the end of her hallway at home, mop in hand. Not moving, just staring. His name patch was gone. In its place was another word. Witness. One morning, she woke to find her shoes wet. Damp footprints tracked from her front door to her room and back. She lived alone. Callie tried to forget it, to bury it. But then she heard the announcement. A new custodian had been hired. The voice on the PA said his name clearly, Evan McCrae. She confronted the front office, demanding to see the new hire. The receptionist blinked, confused. "He's out cleaning room 313, she said. "It's being reopened for the new term." But the West Wing had been condemned. When Callie ran to the hallway, she saw the doors were wide open. Light spilled out. She stepped through, expecting to find someone in coveralls. Instead, she found only silence, except for the faint sound of a mop sloshing water just around the corner. But there was no one there. No wet floor. No bucket. Just the lockers. And one of them was slightly open. Locker 313. Inside was a yearbook from 1994. Every student was accounted for, except one. A blank space sat where Evan's photo should be, and in the margin, written in shaky pen. "He cleaned what we forgot. He stayed because we didn't." Behind the school, beneath decades of ivy and concrete, a maintenance tunnel runs parallel to the West Wing. It hasn't been opened in years, but on quiet nights, passing security sometimes hears the distant squeak of wheels rolling over tile, and the low hum of a janitor's tune echoing in the dark. He was never hired, but somehow he always had keys, and now someone else is wearing the patch. Did you know some schools have announcement systems that still broadcast, even when no one is in the studio? At East Ridge High, students swore the intercom would crackle to life, even during summer break. The weird part? The voice didn't sound like anyone on campus, and it kept saying the same thing over and over. Attendance is mandatory. You're not allowed to leave. Most thought it was a prank, until a senior disappeared during morning roll call, and the announcements never stopped after that. East Ridge High was like any aging suburban school. Outdated lockers, water fountains that worked half the time, and a dusty smell that never quite left the hallways. But what set it apart was the announcement room, a small, windowless broadcast booth nestled between the library and the admin office. For years, the morning announcements were handled by seniors on the student council. They'd read from a sheet of paper at 8 a.m. sharp. Club meetings, lunch menus, sports wins, and the occasional awkward birthday shout-out. But in the fall of 2016, something strange began to happen. Students reported hearing announcements that weren't part of the schedule. Not before school, not after, but right in the middle of class. Random bursts of static would cut through the intercom, followed by a cold, monotone voice reading messages that no one had written. All students must remain in their designated zones. No one may leave the premises until all names are accounted for. This is your final warning. At first, teachers thought it was a malfunction. The PA system was old, and it wasn't unheard of for signals to get crossed. But the timing was always too precise, 8:47 a.m. every morning. Not a minute before, not a second after. And the messages, they grew more specific. Jacob Marshall, you were seen exiting the cafeteria, unsupervised. Return immediately. Room 208 has exceeded occupancy. Adjust immediately. That last one hit a little too close. Room 208 was Mr. Pierce's history class, and on the morning that message played, the attendance sheet had one extra name on it. One extra voice had responded during roll call. But when Mr. Pierce tried to count heads, one student in the back row, someone no one remembered seeing before, was gone. The seat was empty, but warm. Some students laughed it off, claiming it was a senior prank. Others started skipping school entirely. Then came the day the announcements played after hours. Security footage from October 3rd showed the school empty at 9:03 p.m., except for a janitor, Elias, who was cleaning near the broadcast booth. He reported hearing voices from inside the locked studio. He assumed someone had left the speaker system on, but when he opened the door, the room was dark and empty. The switchboard was off. The mic light wasn't on, but the speakers in the hallway still blared. Remain seated. Do not look outside the windows. Something is moving through the lot. Elias bolted. He turned in his keys the next morning and never came back. The school brought in technicians to inspect the intercom wiring. They tested the console, replaced parts, even removed the microphone. But every day, at 8:47 a.m., the voice returned. The same sterile tone, the same eerie phrases. And then, new names started being spoken. Émilie Travers. You're not where you are supposed to be. Dylan Sharp. Report to the office. Immediately. Marcus Lane. You are missing. Attendance must be complete. These weren't announcements. They were warnings. And every time a student's name was read, they'd vanish for a few hours, sometimes all day. They'd return, dazed, confused, and unable to remember where they had been. Or worse, they'd just stop coming back altogether. The school administration stayed quiet. Teachers were told to ignore technical anomalies. But whispers grew. Some students claimed the voice didn't sound recorded. It sounded watchful, like it was listening before it spoke. One senior, Linnea, decided to dig deeper. She had been a part of the morning announcement crew the previous year and still had access to the booth. One afternoon, she snuck in after school, determined to record the 8:47 a.m. message and figure out where it was coming from. She placed her phone on the desk, hit record, sat silently. At 8:46, nothing. Dead air. At 8:47, static. And then the voice. But it didn't read a generic message this time. Linnea Monroe. You were not given permission to enter this space. You were not meant to hear this. You are now marked absent. Her phone was found the next day, still recording. The audio lasted 3 hours. The door had been locked from the inside. Linnea was never found. Rumors exploded. Some believed the intercom was cursed. Others thought it was an old surveillance system left behind by a previous administrator, one who had died in the building decades ago under suspicious circumstances. But the most chilling theory came from an old yearbook. A group of students flipping through archives in the library found a photo of the broadcast club from 1973. The layout of the room was the same. Same desk, same switchboard. But one of the students in the photo looked exactly like Linnea. Not similar, identical. And next to her name, studio operator, morning announcements. But there were no digital edits, no Photoshop. It was a printed photo, aged with time. And Linnea hadn't even been born yet. The following week, a new announcement played. Broadcast resumes indefinitely. Attendance is now being enforced. Since then, East Ridge High has made subtle changes. The announcement room is sealed off. The PA speakers have been disabled. But every now and then, usually between second and third period, the system activates. Only for a few seconds. Attendance is mandatory. You are not allowed to leave. No one knows who's speaking or listening. But one thing's certain. If you ever hear your name over the speaker, don't answer. Because once you're marked absent, you're no longer part of the class. You're part of something else entirely. You can look through every graduation photo from 2014 to 2019, and you'll always find him in the back row. Same posture, same blank expression, same black hoodie. The problem? He died in 2013. Edison High was one of those schools with too much history. The kind of place where the boiler room had handwritten warning signs in chalk, where parts of the building were off-limits due to renovations that never seemed to happen, where the class rings from 1995 still sat unsold in the front office drawer, untouched and covered in dust. But no one ever talked about Isaac Miller. Not the teachers, not the students, not even during senior pranks or haunted hallway nights. He wasn't memorialized with a plaque or a tree. There were no posters, no yearbook dedication. And yet, somehow, every student knew about him. It always started the same way. You'd be sitting in a second-floor classroom, usually room 214. The bell would ring. The teacher would be taking attendance. And out of the corner of your eye, you'd see someone quietly slip into the last row. No door opened. No sound of footsteps. Just a presence. He never raised his hand. Never spoke. Just sat there, staring forward. No phone. No bag. Just a worn black hoodie, sleeves frayed, and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in years. By the time class ended, he was gone. And when you asked someone, anyone, they'd say, "What guy?" People said he was part of the class of 2014. A quiet kid, top of his class, almost invisible. Isaac Miller. Always sitting in the last row, always the first to finish tests. Rumor was he died in a car crash on a rainy March morning. Slid off the road while heading to school. His locker remained locked for years after. But the strange part was this. His name never appeared on the school's roster. Not in the archives. Not in district records. Not even on attendance logs. Students swore they had classes with him. Teachers, however, wouldn't confirm it. And if you pushed, they'd just shift the subject and remind you to focus on your midterms. Then there was Ava, straight A, student, drama club president, and curious enough to ruin her own peace of mind. She claimed she saw Isaac during homeroom one day in October. He was there for only a minute, sitting in the far right seat. Watching her, she noticed something strange. He had an ID badge, just like everyone else. Only his didn't have a barcode. Just his photo. Blurry. Faded. After that, things got weird. Her locker would click open on its own. The lights in the auditorium would flicker when she passed by. And on her desk during finals week, someone had scribbled in pen, "Don't forget me this time." She started digging. Went to the office, asked about Isaac. The receptionist's smile faltered. "There's no student here by that name," she said. When Ava pressed further, she was told she was mistaken and gently escorted out. But that night, she received a direct message on an anonymous school forum. Just 5 words. He like you. Be careful. From then on, she wasn't the only one seeing him. 3 different students spotted Isaac at once, standing at the end of the hallway just before the final bell. When they turned to look, he was gone. One girl claimed her phone captured a photo of her class. Isaac was in the background, his face half-turned. The metadata said it was taken in 2016. The only problem? The girl had just taken it that morning in 2019. Now here's where it gets more psychological. There's a theory floating around the school that Isaac Miller never existed at all. At least, not in any official capacity. The whispers suggest he was a manifestation. A kind of echo. Not a ghost. Not exactly. More like a memory so strong it latched onto the school itself. He was quiet, ignored, forgotten. But now, he remembers you. They say he shows up for the loneliest students. The ones who sit in the back row. The ones falling behind. The ones thinking they don't matter. And when they see him, it's not always scary. At first, some students claim they talked to him, that he told them what classes to skip, what teachers to avoid, what paths to take. But there's a cost. One student, Elijah, started showing up to class in a black hoodie. Said it helped him feel closer to Isaac. Within a week, he stopped speaking to anyone. Just sat in the back, silent, watching. Then he stopped coming to school altogether. When someone went to his house, they found his bedroom door locked, and the words back soon scratched into the wood. No one's heard from him since. Some believe that Isaac wants to graduate, that he's reliving the same loop, class, silence, disappearance, over and over, trapped between unfinished business and being completely forgotten. Others believe he's looking for someone to replace him, someone else to vanish from the roll call, someone else to sit quietly in that last row, unnoticed and slowly erased from memory, until they become the next ghost story. One substitute teacher swore she'd never return to Edison after a single semester. She walked into room 214 on her first day, took attendance, and paused. There was one student at the back who hadn't answered. She called out, "Isaac Miller?" The student looked up slowly, expressionless, then nodded once. She marked him present. The next day, she tried to double-check the attendance list. There was no Isaac Miller listed for any class. When she mentioned it to the head of the department, he looked her dead in the eyes and said, "We don't mark him absent. That's how he stays quiet." But perhaps the most disturbing thing of all, the class of 2023 printed their yearbook early. Digital proofs were sent to students in April. Dozens of people claimed they saw him again, standing in the corner of the senior photo. Same hoodie, same stare. The school demanded a reprint. The photo was edited, but a few physical proofs leaked out before the fix. In every copy, you could see a faint outline, just barely visible. But if you increase the contrast, you'll see him, still waiting in the back row, still showing up for class, even after all these years. Every teacher leaves a mark on their students. But what happens when a teacher was never really there? In 2014, an entire sophomore class in a Pennsylvania high school was taught by a substitute teacher who, according to school records, had never been hired. No parole, no background. No one even remembered interviewing her. And yet, every student swore she was real. It started on a rainy Thursday in late October, one of those gray mornings when the clouds press so low, it feels like the sky might fall. Mr. Rourke, the regular English teacher for room 108, called out sick that day. A last-minute emergency, the kind that usually sends the main office scrambling to find any available sub. But this time, they didn't have to. When the bell rang for second period, students shuffled in expecting an empty desk and a worksheet. Instead, a woman stood already at the whiteboard. Pale hands, long black dress, thin wire-rimmed glasses that caught the flickering fluorescent lights. No one had seen her come in. She introduced herself simply as Ms. Winslow. Her voice was calm, but carried an odd cadence, like she'd learned English from a phonograph recording from the 1920s. She spoke in full, formal sentences, used words like penmanship and elocution. Some students thought it was a joke, an elaborate prank, maybe. But she wasn't trying to be funny. She handed out ink pens, real ones, with nibs that had to be dipped in little bottles she placed on each desk. The paper was parchment. The assignment? Write a letter to someone you've lost. But here's the thing. No one told her this was the week of the school's grief awareness program. No one informed her that the class had recently lost a student, Liam Decker, in a car accident just 3 weeks earlier. Half the class froze when they read the prompt. The other half began writing. It should have been just a strange one-off, a quirky substitute with vintage vibes. But Ms. Winslow kept coming back, every day that week. And nobody questioned it, because Mr. Rourke was apparently still out. Only later, people realized something was wrong. No one ever saw her in the faculty lounge, or in the hallway, or even entering or leaving the building. The front office staff had no idea who she was. When one student, Amy, asked where she parked, Ms. Winslow simply replied, "I take the trolley." There hadn't been a trolley in that town since 1947. On the fourth day, things turned colder, literally. Room 108 began dropping in temperature. Other teachers complained about the draft. Maintenance checked the vents. Nothing. It was always coldest during second period, and only in that room. And then the writing assignments changed. She stopped giving traditional prompts. Instead, she began asking students to describe the last thing you remember before falling asleep. Or write down a memory that doesn't belong to you. One student, Marco, turned in a short paragraph that made no sense. It talked about being in a trench, soaked in mud, calling out to a name he didn't recognize. He swore he didn't write it, said the words were already on the page when he looked down. Others began to notice things too, small things. Their handwriting looked different when they turned in assignments, like it had been copied by someone else, like it was older, slanted, cursive strokes no one used anymore. The class began to dread second period. One girl fainted after claiming Ms. Winslow had leaned in and whispered her name, but pronounced it as if it were from another century. At first glance, this sounds like a campfire story, an urban legend passed between lockers. But here's where it gets difficult to ignore. Ms. Winslow's name appears exactly once in the school's digital attendance system. October 27th, second period. It was typed in under guest educator, but the user ID attached to the entry belongs to a staff member who died in 2006. The timestamp is even stranger. It was entered at 2:13 a.m. There's a theory that floats around certain forums, especially those that deal with liminal experiences in schools. It's called the drift. The idea is that some buildings, particularly older institutions with long histories, develop weak spots in time. Not time travel, but more like time echoes. Moments, people, impressions that loop back around and play themselves out in the present, sometimes without context. According to archived records, there really was a Ms. Winslow, an English teacher from the 1920s. She died of influenza in the middle of a school year. She was reportedly beloved by her students, especially for her emphasis on letters of longing, a practice where students wrote unsent letters to those who had passed. It's the exact same assignment she gave in room 108. By Friday, things hit a breaking point. That day, Ms. Winslow asked the class to write a goodbye letter to someone they'd never met. She didn't explain what that meant. She just walked between the rows of desks, laying a pale hand on each student's shoulder. As they wrote, many claimed they felt a presence behind them. Not just her, something else. A pressure, a breath on the back of the neck. One student ran out of the room, crying after she saw her own handwriting begin to move by itself, as if someone else was guiding her hand. That was the last day she appeared. When Mr. Rourke returned the following Monday, he looked confused when students mentioned Ms. Winslow. He hadn't called in sick. He said he'd been in class all week. But the students remember him not being there. Their journals were filled with writing prompts he never assigned. Their desks still had ink stains from pens he never distributed. When they checked the security cameras, room 108's feed was static for the entire week. Not corrupted, just blank. No substitute was ever found under that name. No paper trail. No pachik. No visitor log signature. Nothing. But in the back of the classroom, someone had placed an old wooden ink box. Inside, it was a bundle of letters, written in the hands of the students. Each one addressed to names no one could remember writing. And tucked inside the lid, a photo, black and white, faded, a class picture from nearly a century ago. And in the middle of the back row, Ms. Winslow, smiling, holding a clipboard, and staring directly at the camera, as if she knew you'd be watching.